Joy Ndwandwe from Eswatini, formerly Swaziland. Joy is the founder and president of Indigenous Knowledge Hub for the Second Liberation, expressed through natural rights and the integrating of Indigenous knowledge with modernity. Take that in, it's quite a powerful idea. The Hub is an academic space for policymaking and researchers, for policymakers and researchers for preserving and integrating Indigenous knowledge into current modern knowledges towards addressing our current dilemmas. Joy, it's good to know, is also a doctoral student at the University of South Africa. And so she has a more institutional, like if we zoom in to our inner selves and we zoom out to the relational dimensions, and we zoom out not as far as Ubuntu, but in the space between, I think the institutional level and how we bring these together, I think this is what Joy aspires and is actually addressing. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm so glad you're here and we can see you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. First, I'd like to thank Howard Richards, Professor Howard Richards, who introduced me to World Dignity University in 2013. I saw him earlier in the work. He connected me to the place where I needed to be. And I truly appreciate that. That's how I met Evelyn in 2013. My story is simple after that introduction, and it links to what Lyndon said. I first read my opening remarks are connected to what Lyndon said, Harris said just now. I'm not a victim. So I do this work from a very profound space of confidence, dignity, and contentment. And my story comes from understanding both sides. I come from an academic family, which was within the institution called the university. And I also come from a very traditional background, which is the Ndwandwe legacy, a kingdom without any geographic space, but the dignity is within our DNA. So we embody that. And this is why when I started reading and immersing myself as to how we eroded our dignity within the Southern African region, it was very important for me to learn that the systemic negation, the humiliation, and the marginalization of our indigenous knowledge was a major contributing factor. And this is what eroded our dignity. Therefore, when we talk today about dignity through solidarity, it is a personal solidarity. I have to have solidarity with myself because we lost the kingdom and we lost knowledge. Fortunately, my great aunt was married within the Kingdom of Eswatini, where I'm now born. So a lot of that indigenous knowledge was institutionalized where we are now born. And this is why my approach towards the Indigenous Knowledge Hub is to say, there is indigenous knowledge that can be researched in the prehistoric and historical context and integrated in modernity, because modernity is who we are. I wouldn't survive a day without it. Therefore, this moment sorry, I don't know who's calling me now. Therefore, this moment of presenting this concept of institutionalizing this integration of indigenous knowledge and modernity is a very important part, particularly because when you look at our indicators in terms of contributing towards the knowledge economy, contributing towards the creative economy, our indicators are very low. So if we start this initiative rooted within the context of contributing towards also Agenda 2063, which is the Africa we want. Indigenous knowledge needs to be part of that journey. And this journey will first take us to the Agenda 2030, which is the United Nations UN SDGs. Specifically, my focus is let's take this journey of our dignity into that open space that is an internationally recognized space, which is the education for sustainable development. For me to argue that quality education has to include the integration of our indigenous knowledge. How can we tell the world we are educated when we're not educated in our indigenous knowledge? Therefore, integrating indigenous knowledge within the education is a primary objective of what we would like to see in policy, in transformation and training, in capacitating educators, in also mobilizing youth around integrating themselves into this indigenous knowledge with the modernity that we find ourselves in. Therefore, the areas that I'm looking to institutionalize is within peace, governance, democracy, ecology, environment, inclusive development, ethical leadership, education, law, and Abrahamic religions, because I found that in my research, most of the religions came to us to supplant and not to supplement our indigenous knowledge. And therefore, it is time to restore that dignity that was lost, to restore it through solidarity of understanding that we lost, and through the solidarity that we can regain our consciousness, because most of these knowledges were centered around that. And this would also involve a lot of community engagement and international engagement. Lastly, for me, dignity through humiliation is really centered around natural rights. And this is where I am coming from in presenting this story. And it is a personal story because I grew up without my own indigenous knowledge. And I only went into it as a researcher, and I had to then find myself in that story. So I am part of the story that systemically negated the indigenous knowledge, and I found it because I embody the soul of the queen that institutionalized this indigenous knowledge within this country called the Kingdom of Eswatini. I thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so very much, Joy. I think that you touch on what Evelyn's been working on for quite a long time, is how to bring and rethink the way the history of humanity has been framed to exclude so many kinds of knowledge, so many peoples, so many histories, and has been used in the service of oppression and humiliation, rather than in the service of the richness of what humanity has experienced in different times, and even in the present times, though often very suppressed. So I find this very exciting